last team I want to talk about this week is the Portland Trailblazers. It's been kind of a rough start to the season for them as well. They're sitting at 5-5, which in their case is eighth in the West. I know I talked a little bit about the Lakers also being 5-5. That was good enough for 10th in the West for them. The West is still pretty tight, pretty competitive. There's no really awesome teams that are just running away with it. This season at least. So they're definitely still in the mix for the playoffs, but they would have liked to get off to a better start. Damian Lillard is the main story for them this year. He's really struggled to start the year. I've seen some people say he's washed up. I just can't see that that's possible. I think it's just more of a slump thing for him. I mean, on June 1st, we saw him score 55 points in a playoff game, and he was basically carrying that Portland team through the playoffs. And are we seriously considering that 5 months later it's over for him? Like that doesn't make sense. Usually there's not just a steep fall off where you're one of the best players in the league and then boom, a couple months later you're terrible. No, I don't think that that's the case. The other Damian Lillard piece was a story leak that he met with AD and LeBron in the offseason to discuss possibly teaming up with or possibly leaving Portland, I think was the way they phrased it, as to not get accused of tampering. So not specifically joining the Lakers, but, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think that was timely for them. He was just kind of inconsistent or not deceptive, just kind of unclear about what he wanted his future to be with the Trailblazers in the offseason. Now that the season's starting, he's saying that he's all in. And I think that this was kind of leaked by his camp to kind of emphasize that. Because basically, he's like, oh, guys, I met with AD and LeBron in the offseason. If they couldn't recruit me to come to LA, then it's just not happening. I'm not interested in leaving Portland. Because I think what's happening, and I think the GM may have came to him or somebody in the front office may have said, hey, we're having trouble getting any trade offers or improving this roster, because anytime another team calls, it's they're wanting to know about you. So we need a more firm commitment, or at least if you could give us something publicly. So if teams kind of read the tea leaves and see that as a firm commitment on his part to Portland, then maybe they'll start calling about the CJ McCollums and Yusef Nurkic's to see if they can get a deal going. I feel like we've kind of run the course with this Portland group, at least the CJ, Nurk, and Dame trio. I do feel kind of bad for McCollum in particular, because he's been every trade rumor for what now seems like 8 years. Anytime Portland has talked about trading for someone, it's been McCollum is always the first one discussed. And I don't think it's any fault of McCollum or Nurkic that this thing hasn't worked out. The problem is they're the only enticing pieces to really seriously improve this roster. So McCollum has 3 more years at 30-ish million. Nurkic is on the last year of his deal at 12. I think for this team to really improve, I think they can afford to let go of McCollum to bring in a more defensive-minded wing who can kind of do a little bit of scoring or playmaking. I honestly don't think the Ben Simmons and Dame fit is a bad one. Obviously, Simmons doesn't fit the scoring piece of what they need, but they can find some other scoring on this team. But they really need some wing help. I mean, Robert Covington is fine, but I think they could use some more help there. Robert Covington is kind of playing the 4-man for them at 6'5", and then they have a 6'5" Norman Powell. CJ McCollum is 6'4", 6'3", and then Dame, not very big either. So the starting lineup for them just isn't very big, and that kind of leads into what the issue is with Nurkic, at least fit-wise on this roster. Definitely more of an offensive center. He's got some playmaking stuff. I like him as a player, but when you're rolling out there with the team that they have that's really small and they kind of get eaten alive, year after year, scoring wise, they're always near the bottom in terms of being a defensive team. I think they need to bring in a more defensive oriented center. So if they can find a defensive oriented center and maybe some more wing help to kind of increase the size of this team, maybe they can become like a halfway decent defensive team. And then as far as like the guard combination, I mean, obviously you're losing a lot of scoring with McCollum, but if you go with Powell and Dame as your starting backcourt, Anthony Simons has looked pretty good this year. So I wouldn't feel too bad about a guard trio of Simons, Dame, and Powell. And then if you will just say you traded Ben Simmons for, McCollum, then you could go Simmons, Covington. Your spacing's still not terrible. And then I don't know, name your center, Nerlens Noel. I don't care who it is at center for them defensively. You got to find somebody, I think, for Nurkic who's like more interested in like kind of an offensive center. The Hornets off the top of my head are a team that I think should be in the market for like something a little bit better at center. That's just off the top of my head. There are other teams, but it's going to be a specific fit for Nurkic because he's going to want big money, only making $12 million at this stage in his career. He's worth a lot more. So you're going to have to find somebody who's willing to commit some big money to him. He's not as enticing of a trade piece as McCollum. But like I said, I don't think that those two are the reason that they're necessarily losing. They're just kind of weird fits. And if the surrounding team was better, it would work. But being the only like real enticing trade pieces and trade chips, if they're serious about building a title contender here, they need to kind of, find some more defensive guys and some more size for this team. I think Lillard will get it together. I think we'll still be talking about this team in the playoffs. I'm hoping that he can figure out a way to get like a title contending team in Portland because he has certainly suffered enough with this franchise to deserve that. And they've kind of not done him a lot of favors. They've made some weird trades and held on to some guys that they probably should have let go as far as like prospects. We kind of talked about it in our Western Conference preview video where they've been really liberal with trading draft picks, but holding on to guys like Simons, for instance, who a couple of years ago, his trade value was a lot higher than it is now. Same thing with Zach Collins. Like they ended up letting Zach Collins walk out the door when a few years before all the injury stuff happened with him, teams were like really excited about him as a young player to build around if they were looking to move off of a veteran guy. So yeah, if they can get some wing help in here and maybe a more defensive oriented center, I think this could be a really dangerous team. I mean, Damian Lillard is top 10 player in the league roughly. So I think anytime you've got somebody like that, you should be kind of in the mix, really competing.